between, it's coastal. South Jersey is sea level, which means that if a big bunch of water comes, then that whole side of Jersey can get flooded. And that's exactly what's been happening over the last couple of months. The last year in particular, there's been a tremendous amount of flooding in Jersey. That's because of this. You got to study your astrology. This is why we call our organization is called Kemet Science Institute. We call it science for a particular reason. If you don't know the sciences, in Africa they don't call them religions. The real religions are not called religions in Africa. The real religions are called science. Okay? Because the science goes to the Mother Earth. All right? The crackers call it quantum physics. That's their new religion. All right? But if you understand the sciences and you understand this, and you understand why over the next 3 years there's going to be a lot of trouble on coastal areas all over the planet. France, England, the Low Countries, what they call the Low Countries, Holland and Belgium, been getting flooded terribly over the last couple of years. Thousands of people have been getting killed. That's for reasons, because of this. This is Neptune. It means water. It's very water. Water. Okay? If you reverse that, you get this. That's not Mickey D. Arch. Okay? Well, you can talk about that too, but that's another discussion. Ma, if you're talking about W, you're talking about water, and you're talking about Ma. You know what do they say about a woman's wrath? Okay? If you're talking about this today, then you're talking about this, which is the reverse of this. Okay, Nomo. Okay, who's Nomo?
Dogon spirit.
Right. If you're talking about the spirit of the Dogon, which is Nomo, the primordial force on the earth is called Nomo according to the Dogon. Okay, Nomo is represented by this. Okay, or this, which means water. Okay? Now, if you reverse that, you get to Ma, which means mother. M-A-I-A is what the Indians call the earth. Okay? Original source of mother. You're talking about the mother's revenge. So you're going back here, and that's why you better get out of South Jersey. Now. If you live in North Jersey, you got a little bit of time, but not much because North Jersey is hills. So you got a little bit of time. If you live in Philadelphia, you're in trouble. Because Philadelphia is low in a valley called Delaware Valley. Philadelphia sits down, which means if you live in New Orleans, you really better get out. Because New Orleans is under sea level. And if it wasn't for those dikes that they got down there, that city wouldn't even exist. But places like New Orleans, okay, places like the western part of Florida, okay, where you got the Everglades, anywhere around the Everglades, which is below sea level, okay, anywhere on the eastern side of the United States, and you get Scallion's books. You get Michael Scallion's books. He talks about some of this stuff. Michael Scallion talks about the earth maps and the earth grids. He talks about how all this stuff is going to get wiped out sooner or later.
Well, New York City is an island. So
New York City is an island, sits on a granite rock.
oh, yeah, that's
Sits on a granite rock. But, the problem y'all got, okay, thank you, sister. Thank you very much. See, y'all starting to jive with me now, because, see, you took the word right out of my mouth. Granite is the worst thing in the world if you're talking about earthquakes. Why? Vibrations. Granite resonates. It vibrates. It shapes. Real easy. If you kick a granite bar, it's like kicking a bell. It sounds. That's why they use granite in computers in the form of what? Silicon, chips, crystal. Because it's granite. It resonates. That's how you get sound. Okay? If you live in New York City, in particular, Manhattan in particular, you might have a little bit of a problem because this whole island is granite. You're walking on granite, which means that if an earthquake ever hits this joint, all this is coming down. And this is not earthquake proof. This is brick and mortar. If it's brick and mortar, which means it's going to get smashed like an anthill. Okay? And that's coming here later on. But before all that comes, this is coming. The mother's wrath is coming first in the form of water. So just like you had a blizzard last year that knocked you on your pants, you're going to see more water. Snow is water. You're going to see more of that. A lot more of that. That was just a warning signal, just to let you know what's coming down the pike. Because she is mad and upset. She's mad and upset because we've been messing her up. We've been poisoning her, stabbing her, sticking all kind of needles in her veins, and she's going to get revenge. And that means now. Okay? So if you saw a blizzard, of course, they're adding to the misery because they got a thing called HARP. And their little monster that they created, the crackers, the crackers have invented a little thing called HARP that they got stuck up there in Alaska that's resonating signals bouncing off the ionosphere. Any of y'all ever heard of HARP? Okay, HARP is extremely dangerous. If you took a live electric wire and stuck it on the side of your head, you know what would happen, right? That's what this is doing. That's what HARP is doing to the planet. Okay? And what it is doing purposely, and what they're trying to do is they're trying to capture the electromagnetic flux of the planet. They're trying to get a grip. They're trying to get a handle on the electromagnetic wave that surrounds the envelope that surrounds this planet. And they're doing it through an instrument called HARP. But what they're doing is they're throwing this whole entire planet out of whack. And that's one of the reasons why the blizzard last year was so bad. And that's why one of the reasons, partially, the reason why there's been so many disastrous weather patterns all over the planet. Because these people have been adding to the misery that's being meted down by Mother Earth. So you have a double whammy here, a double punch. You're getting hit by the right and the left, uppercuts and roundhouses. Okay? And it's going to get a lot worse because the next 3 years in particular is dominated by Neptune, which means water. So you're going to see a lot of water around. If you live in South Jersey, get out. If you live in Philadelphia, you better think twice. Okay? I won't say get out because I live there. If you live in New York, you got a little bit of time because the earthquake is not going to come for a while. You're going to have more water at first, and the earthquake's going to come later after the water wash away some of it. The earthquake's going to take away the rest of it.
You said North Jersey. How much time in North Jersey have you?
About the same amount of time as New York. About the same amount of time in New York.
Around about what?
Well, some people have been saying, okay, specifics is difficult. Who said that? Specifics. All right, specifics is difficult. I'll tell you why. Because just like the Whiteys know through their quantum sciences now, Preston Nichols and Al Bielek and those kind of people, all the stuff they got out at Los Alamos and Sandia and down at Kennedy, it's very, very difficult to nail a event to a time period. The reason being that just like time bends because it does not really exist, okay, matter also does not exist because time don't exist. If time bends, therefore it's fake, then matter also bends, therefore it's fake too. Einstein found that out. Okay, and this is why if you read some types of comic books, you get the old Sinbad movies, you can see people walking through walls. They can do that now through the quantum sciences. Preston Nichols talks about that in some of his books. They have the power now where they can walk through a wall because they rediscovered some of those ancient sciences that deal with dimensions. Okay, because at the same time this planet here exists, okay, the exact same planet with the exact same people and the exact same plants and the exact same minerals exists in a different dimension. Okay? That's what sliders is all about. Okay? They dimension hop. That's dimension hopping. Okay? And just like you have a second dimension planet, you also have a third dimension planet. As long as your imagination can stretch, you have those dimensions. If you want to get a good example of this, get a mirror. Very good classic example of how you can prove this theory. Get a mirror. Right, he got it. And you get another mirror. If you get two mirrors, and you look in one mirror, if you look at the other mirror through the first mirror, you can see time indefinitely in a physical form. Because you'll see the second image, you'll see the third image, you'll see the fourth image, the fifth image, and as long as your eye can follow the images, you will see images indefinitely. If you could look into those images through that mirror, you will see millions of images that are exactly identical, but each one is separate. It exists unto itself, but it's all the same, coming out of the same plate of glass. That's exactly the way these dimensions work. And they found this through quantum sciences, and this is why they can now walk through walls. Okay? There's nothing elaborate about this stuff. It's very simple because these people here know about it. Those Indians and those shamans in Africa, they know. They do it every day. They walk through dimensions. They can go to the past, to the present, to the future. Whatever you want to know, they can tell you because they've been there. And they're not Supermen. They're just like us, huh?
They said some of the Maroons in Jamaica, they master invisibility and they could go through walls.
Sure. Whatever you will can be. Whatever you will can be. In other words, never say never, and nothing is impossible. If you believe that, you're pretty close to the truth. Which means that if they tell you it don't exist or it can't be, then believe the opposite, and you'll be closer to the truth. Same thing with their news. Whatever their news is that comes across the boob tube, if you think the opposite of that, then you're closer to the truth. All right? But look, I want to get back to Neptune. There's going to be a lot of damage all over this planet, and the reason is because the mother is mad. Okay, and she's showing her wrath now, which means that she's crying. She's crying, and she's manifesting her pain through her tears in the form of water. Okay? Okay, and this is nothing really but the return of Nomo. Or Nomo manifesting itself, okay, in its easiest form, which is water, where it originally came. Because before there were land civilizations on this planet, there were water civilizations. Because if you study your Bible, even though it's completely twisted around, you'll find that there was water before there was earth, right? That says so in Genesis, right? That's correct. Because before there were continents, before there were the 7 continents, there was only one. And before there was the one, there was none. Because at one point there was only water. And that's when these ancient Dogons, these little primitive looking people in those bushes out there talk about Nomo coming from the water, the force of the water. Okay, that's what they're talking about. They're talking about history a million years ago. Those civilizations that existed on this planet before there was any land here. We're not even talking about the civilizations that existed here when the land was here. We're talking pre-land. We're talking about Earth when it was called okay, that's not the way it was spelled because this Latin language didn't exist, obviously. But the concept of this, the tumultuous waters, okay, that's the concept of Nomo, the creator, all right, came in the form of the water, came to the water first, settled in the water first. That's why if you go to Africa, water is very important in Africa. And you already been to Africa and you've seen the water ceremonies, the water rituals? Water in Africa is extremely important. The spirits of the waters are very, very sacred to Africans. And also these people, and that's why all the base civilizations are founded around lakes. The most ancient civilizations on this planet are around the lakes. If you want to study the history of this planet, the oldest portions of the history, you go to the lakes. Not the mountains, because the lakes came before the mountains. Okay? And I'm going to tell you something else, too, that's going to surprise you. There's a lot of stuff still in them lakes and still inside the mountains. You go to Shasta, there's some really bizarre stuff going on in Shasta, Mount Shasta in California. All right? Because it's a nodal point. You go to places like Devil's Triangle in Wyoming. Okay? You go to Catskills. There's certain parts of Catskills upstate New York that they don't even let you in. What's that thing called? The Adirondacks? Adirondacks? You go up there, it's the biggest park in the United States of America. The reason why that's restricted land is because they don't want you on it, because of what's in there. Same thing out west. You go to some of these Indian reservations. How many of y'all know that there are enough Indian reservations in the state of Arizona, in the Four Corners area, this area right here. This area right here is called Four Corners. It's the only contiguous interlocking quadrangle in the whole United States of America. In this area here, you have enough Indian reservations to equal the square mileage of New York State. Okay, you're talking about the Zuni, the Hopi, the Navajo. There's a whole bunch of tribes out there. The whiteys don't even go on that land. They don't go nowhere near that land. Just like, what do you call it, the Adirondacks? You go up there, there's certain parts up there in that part, them crackers don't go nowhere near it because of what's in there. Because those vortexes. Those vortexes like electrical batteries, huge, humongous electrical generators. And if, like I said before, if you put your foot in there, it's just like Devil's Triangle. You might not come out. So they know where to go, and they know where not to go, and they know what parts of this country had to be roped off and made restricted turf. Okay? And in some of these places like Nellis, down there in the Arizona desert, in the Mojave Desert, they'll shoot you if you try to get on that land. They'll kill you quick. And people have died on that land trying to get in there. Okay? Same thing upstate New York. You know, half of New York State is restricted territory. Y'all didn't even know that. Okay? Because of the stuff that they know. But I want to close this out. It's getting a little bit late. And we want to get in some Q&A. Right. We want to get in some Q&A. But there's a very strange thing that's going to happen starting on December the 21st. Now, I told you all about September 26th. I told you about September 26th. And I said you better watch out because there's going to be a lot of blood. If y'all got the tape, study the tape, because I said on September the 26th, something's going to kick out where there's going to be a lot of blood. I specifically mentioned the word blood. I emphasized September the 26th. I said on September the 26th, there's going to be a lot of blood. Somebody's going to die. That's what I said on the tape. Somebody's going to die. Well, I got a call about 4 o'clock in the morning on September the 27th from Phil Valentine, of all people, from Brooklyn. And he said, guess what? He said, congratulations, you was right. I said, right about what? He said, what you said about September the 26th came true. I didn't know it wasn't here. I didn't know it wasn't here. It was over the seas. Now, every single major newspaper in this country carried the same headline on September the 27th. Okay? And as a matter of fact, the story that was written by the Philadelphia Inquirer said that this was one of the, this warfare that broke out between these Arabs and Jews was so intense that they said that they didn't know any other period of warfare that intense. They was killing people like flies, and they said 70 people got killed, but that's what you read in the newspaper. You don't know how many hundreds got killed. Okay? Never in my life have I ever heard shooting like this, except in the movies, said Ahmed Zakah, who was raised on intifada clashes in the Palestinian refugee camps. This is the worst. This is worse than what we heard about the war in Lebanon. This is absolutely incredible. Israeli Army radio summed up the sudden sense of calamity by saying, this is a complete picture of war. September the 27th. I had no idea this was going to kick out there. I knew somebody was going to die, but I just didn't know where. Now, it just so happens that a couple of weeks later, a friend of mine who wanted to come up here today, but he couldn't come, he called me in the middle of October. He said, Henry, is this supposed to be something happening on October the 24th? And I said, I don't really remember that. I said, no. At first, I said, no, I don't remember nothing. He said, well, you told me that something was going to happen on October the 24th. He said, think hard. And I said, well, I don't know. I said, let me check. So I went away from the phone for a little bit. I went back to the phone. I said, you're right. I said, on October the 24th, something is going to kick. Something's going to happen, and somebody's going to die. Unfortunately, something's going to get bloodied up. So the next day, this is what the Philadelphia Inquirer had on its front cover. St. Petersburg burned that night because a boy got shot dead by the cops. Okay? Tore apart the whole city. Biggest riot in Florida's history. And the deadline and the date on there is what?
24.
October the 25th. This is the next day's paper. All right? So I try my best not to predict death and destruction because they're not too nice. Problem y'all got is that you don't understand death. If you understand death, then you understand death is not death. What we call death is not real because it's linear. What we call death is linear, it's Western. So you think that when you die, you're done. But that's not true. When you die, what we call die, when you die, all you do is move. You don't make a vertical leap, you make a horizontal move. That's all. You just shift. You go from one doorway to another doorway. Death is nothing but a doorway. And if you go to the Dogon, okay, you go to the Twa, you go to the Zulu, you go to the Navajos or the Zuni, they'll tell you this. And this is why the shamans in all these different tribes have never ever feared the white man. The real warriors never feared the white man because they knew that the white man never really understood death. Because when the white man came and said, we're going to wipe you off the face of the earth, and those people charged out of there anyway and went to war against the whiteys anyway and wiped them out in huge numbers, which they don't talk about, okay? They didn't understand, as whiteys didn't understand, that these people had a concept of death that is in tune with nature. Because there is no such thing as death in nature. Just like there's no such thing as time, no such thing as space, and no such thing as matter. There's no such thing as death. Because if you was really to die, then you ain't even worth living. You wouldn't even be here if their definition of death was correct. Because that's an insult to nature. To say that your spirit and all that is contained within you evaporates at a certain time is utterly ridiculous. It's ridiculous. There's nothing in nature that dies. All it does is transcends. All you got to do is get some Rosicrucian books. Get those Masonic books. And they teach you all this stuff about the 7 cycles of 7. Okay? And how you just rotate from one form to the next form. You go from the mineral to the plant, from the plant to the animal, from the animal to the human, from the human to the Akasya, Avatar, and on and on and on and on and up to the Devas. You know, when Enoch and Ezekiel flew up on that cloud and they saw those spooks in the sky, that wasn't ghosts that the Westerners reinterpreted their words as meaning. What they really saw was the higher forms of ourselves. They saw pure white light forms, and they said they was angels. There are angels, but they're not what we understand to be angels. So get that concept of death out of your mind because it's Western. And the more Western you stay, the more you're going to get hurt over the next few years. Okay? Now, in January, starting on December the 21st, this is the trigger date. This is the trigger date right here. December the 21st is important. Why? Traditionally. Huh? It's a solstice. It's a solstice. All right? It's important because it's the solstice. Okay? And even the Catholic Church recognizes that because how did they mark the solstice? How did the Catholics and the Christians mark the solstice? They moved Jesus' birth to December 25th. Okay? Which is that Rosicrucian number again, right? But that is really a solstice celebration. It's a solstice celebration. Okay? Just like Easter. Easter is the equinox celebration. The whole deal about the first Sunday after the full moon. You know, and they'll tell you that you can't be no alchemist, and they got to burn you at a stake because you're talking esoteric science and you're talking stars, but yet every single pope that's ever been has been an alchemist. And every Jesuit is initiated into alchemic cults. This so-called CIA organization of Jesuits. Okay? All those people practice underneath the Vatican. Okay? There's books out on that. Okay? About how they go down there at certain times in restricted turf where nobody else is allowed, and they do their little rituals. The same stuff the Skull and Bones do right here at Yale. Okay? But that's the beginning of some real serious stuff, December 21st, but it's really going to start kicking out in January. Why? Because of this. Who knows what this means? Sun. Okay? Starting in January, we're going to see some real weird stuff astrologically, because we're going to see a very intense gathering of solar energy. This is very, very important for you to understand, because something's going to happen in January that's going to mess up everybody, and it's going to carry through the whole winter into the spring, and it's really going to sock you good at the end of March. Because this thing here, when you see this, okay, in an astrological calendar, this means conjunction. This means the sun is conjoining with a particular planet. Okay? Now, in the month of January, you're going to see solar conjunctions. Those of y'all who know anything about astrology, you're going to see solar conjunctions 4 times inside 1 month, which is highly irregular. If you see one of these in 1 month, you want to run. You see one of these, you see a solar conjunction. You have lunar conjunctions all the time in an astrological calendar. You might have 5 or 6 or 7 lunar conjunctions. But because the moon is ruled by the mother force in nature, it's sublime, okay, or intuitive. It's passive, or what they call negative, quote, negative, unquote. The opposite happens with the sun. The sun is active. It's positive. It's hype, which means action, a lot of action. So if the sun, for instance, is conjoined with this little doodad, then you know you really got some problems. No, Mars. Now, interesting, this symbol here, what's the symbol? What's this mean? Anybody notice? Anybody know what this symbol is? Huh? Okay, I mean the symbol, what is the symbol? Why is this symbol created? Why did they use this? Why did the Westerners use this symbol? Right, huh? No, this is a spear, and this is a shield. Okay? Now in Uranus, they use this symbol, which means the spear combined with the power of the sun. Okay? Both of these guys are troublemakers. They're troublemakers. In a Western context, if you study in Western esoterica, then you know that our concept of Mars and Uranus as being troublemaker creates a lot of problems, because perception, your belief is your reality. What you believe is. And because we believe Mars is a troublemaker planet, it goes all the way back to the Romans, and before them it goes back to Mars was the god of what? The god of war. Okay? And because they got it from the Egyptians, who believed the same thing, because they believed in the sun cults, okay, which is dominated by, okay, that's why you see red so much. That's why you see red. Whenever you see war, you see red, because the red is symbolized by blood. Okay? That's why the Christian churches are always red. That's why Santa Claus is red. That's why Rudolph got a, okay? Because all these are symbols. All these are esoteric, subliminal symbols of the power of the sun cults, which dominate this planet. They're male-oriented. Okay? They're male-oriented because they're trying to suppress or cover up the female orientation. Okay? But because we believe that this planet here is a troublemaker war planet, then that means trouble is going to come to us. We're going to see this a lot. In January, we're going to see the power of this phenomenon combined with the power of this phenomenon, and because we believe this to be the fact, we're going to have a lot of trouble. Which means that if they said that there's been a tendency towards flooding, a tendency towards hurricanes, a tendency towards blizzards, and because this guy here is around, that means we're going to have a lot of trouble with the weather starting in January like you ain't never seen in your life. Which means if you ain't got no boots, you better get them now. That's for real. I didn't have no boots 2 years ago and I paid for it. All right? Which means if you got a leaky roof, you in trouble. My roof caved in. Part of my roof caved in last year because of that snow. All right? Right now in Cleveland. Y'all got folks in Cleveland? Anybody got folks in Cleveland? All right? So you know what happened in Cleveland, right? They got socked last week. That's coming here. That's coming here. They got 26 inches in 26 hours. Right? Right? That's coming here. All that destruction that happened over there is coming here in January. So if you saw it last January, you're going to see it again this January. And it's going to be just as bad, if not worse, because we didn't have the sun packing a quadruple power punch last year. We're seeing 4 of these in the month of January, which means that we're going to have a lot of trouble. Okay? Now, in the first half of February, it's going to calm down just a bit, because in February you always have what they call the early spring.
Where do you see this? You said we don't see it. Where we don't see it? Up in the sky or what?
What you mean? Oh, thank you for mentioning the sky. Because one of the reasons why the sun is so dominant in the month of January, why these solar conjunctions rather than lunar conjunctions are so powerful, is because there's a phenomenon happening in the skies that the astronomers are all hitting the panic button about. It's called Hale-Bopp. There's a comet coming here. There's a huge, humongous, gigantic comet coming dead at this planet called Hale-Bopp. It's the twin sister of Terra. I had a dream about this a couple of years ago. I didn't know what the dream was until they started talking about this. Because Hale-Bopp was preceded by what? Any astronomers in here? Last January, what came through? A comet called Hyakutake came through here last January. Okay? January was the month when what happened in the United States? We had tons and tons and tons of blizzard, the biggest snowstorm in the record books in the United States of America. That was Hyakutake. That was the preceding of this one that's coming now. This is the mother lode. The mother lode is called Hale-Bopp. Now, Phil talked about this. Phil Valentine talked about this because he had the gathering of the masters. And the masters talked about a bopping, some kind of bip or a bap or a bop. He talks about that in his tapes. When they did their consultations, this comet popped up, but they didn't know what it was originally. And then I called Phil one day and I said, Phil, do you know what the scientists are saying about what's going to happen this winter? I said, they got a thing called Hale-Bopp. He said, oh, that's what they was talking about. It's not a pop and a bip and a bap, it's a bop. Hale-Bopp is the largest comet they've ever seen, ever. This comet is 4 times the size of the planet Earth. The envelope around this planet, around this comet, the envelope that creates this luster is twice the size of our sun. This thing is headed straight at us. Now, I just heard a report from Preston Nichols. In fact, when Preston Nichols was in Philadelphia last week, I asked him what he knew about Hale-Bopp, because Preston got a lot of sources all over the country. And he said that his people told him that the French, the Germans, and the British, and with some help from the Russians and the Americans, they sent some nukes up here. Right, you heard that? And they tried to nuke Hale-Bopp. No. They tried to nuke it. I heard this back last fall, but I thought it was a joke. Right? They tried to nuke it. The only problem is that this thing is 4 times the size of the Earth. And they got a worse problem. The compound problem is that the comet itself is not the object that's 4 times the size of the Earth. The comet itself is a little tiny meteorite-sized thing. It's only a fraction. It's only a little rock. The problem is what's behind the comet. Behind this comet, Hale-Bopp is the comet. Behind the comet, following in tandem with the comet, which means at the same speed, at the same space, is a thing which they have not named yet, which is acting very, very strange. Now, all these people now are all running to a guy named Sitchin. So he knows where I'm going. They run into this man named Zachariah Sitchin, this Jew that runs around the planet uncovering UFOs, right? And all of a sudden they're taking this guy serious. No pun intended. They're taking this guy serious because Sitchin has been writing for years and years and years about a thing. How do you spell it? Nibiru. N-I-B. Y'all sure now? Is that right? Nibiru. Nibiru is a phenomenon that the Dogon and the Zulu talked about 10,000 years ago, and they got it in their rock art. They called it Nomo. The Europeans call it Nibiru. For thousands of years, the Dogon been calling it Nomo. The return of the sky god that went to the water. Now, how many of y'all ever heard of a guy named Nostradamus? Now, here I get spooky, right? Now, how many of y'all ever read a book called Nostradamus Predicts World War III? Any of y'all ever seen a little book? You seen that book?
Interpreted quatrains that says stuff like, I guess it was what.
Right. It's a book out. I forgot who this white boy is that wrote this book. It's a part of the quatrains that was reinterpreted by computer. This one white boy went to a certain type of computer and reinterpreted the quatrains in accordance to a certain type of way that gave him a whole completely different understanding of what that was all about. It's called Nostradamus Predicts World War III. That book is on the shelves. You can get it at any bookstore. It's about 150 pages, sells for $9.95. All right? Now, in that book, I asked Preston Nichols about this. In that book, the very first chapter is about 20 chapters long, and it tells this long, winding tale about how World War III unfolds. Again, I want to remind you to stop thinking about death in a Western concept. You have to think about death in a different way, okay? Because if you don't think non-Western in terms of death, you're going to go crazy before it happens to you. All right? And that's the worst kind of death you can have. That's the death of 1,000 cuts. Yeah. You want me to stop?
Yeah. Let me change the tape, okay? All right? Because I won't miss the word now.
Good.